السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله وكفى، والصلاة والسلام على عباده الذين اصطفى. أما بعد، رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. رب زدنا علما، رب زدنا علما، رب زدنا علما نافعا، آمين. As we have agreed that we will cover this engagement in 7 sessions, after the introduction, the topic of the first session is intellectual decline. Understanding the intellectual decline of this period in Muslim history. And we have already discussed about our justification of focusing and covering this particular period of Islamic history, which is roughly around 200 years, and which covers 1/7 of Islamic history between 490 after Hijrah to 670 after Hijrah. And we mentioned around 10 points in this justification. Why are we focusing on this period of Muslim history? And from these 10 points, the main and the most important point is the resemblance of those times with what we are experiencing in our times. So we are studying and focusing on this period of history in order to understand the khutta, the problems, challenges Ummah faced in those times, and how was Ummah able to recover and revive, so that we can tread the same path, or at least start thinking in the same direction, initiate a thought process in the same direction. So the main and the most important point was the resemblance. We have shared the 7 topics with the students. The first topic which we will cover, and in which we resemble the most, this current period of the Ummah resembles the period which we are covering the most in intellectual decline. This is our topic for today's session. Before the Crusades happened and eventually the Ummah rose, Jerusalem, the heart of the Muslim Ummah, was opened for Islam, we were in the abyss of decline. And this decline manifested itself in the thought of the Ummah, primarily. In order to reach the correct conclusions about our history and the present, we must have our own philosophy of history. This is very important because we are influenced by the dominant civilization, the Western civilization, in all affairs. Unfortunately, this influence has creeped into even how we think about our religion, how we understand our religion, how we read our history. So in the West, they have their own worldviews and philosophies to understand history. It may be based on the economic interpretation of society, economic interpretation of history, political interpretation of history, class struggle, and all other famous theories of Western history. We may be able to benefit from it to understand the reality around us and to understand the different periods of Muslim history, how we interacted with the West. However, we must primarily have our own philosophy of history based on our own worldview and principles. And this is what the Muslim historians should work upon. However, here, and this is a very long engagement to create a philosophy of history based on Islam. This needs a dedicated engagement and research. However, we can still point to some basic principles which we understand from the Book of Allah, the guiding principles in this regard, in understanding history. For example, the famous ayah of the Quran guides us to the fact that the change never happens, the change never manifests in material, in the reality, unless we change our nufus, unless it is initiated in our nafs. So we have this famous ayah in the Quran, in Surah Al-Anfal. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم ذلك بأن الله لم يك مغيرا نعمة أنعمها على قوم حتى يغيروا ما بأنفسهم وأن الله سميع عليم. Allah says, that is because Allah would not change a favor which He had bestowed upon a people until they change what is within themselves, until the change is initiated in the nufus of the believing community. Change will never manifest outside. Change will never happen outside. And indeed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is hearing and knowing. And there are other ayat which can serve as principles for understanding or correcting our philosophy of history. So we must begin by correcting our own philosophy of history. This is important because the domination on the Muslim Ummah, or the domination on the Muslim Ummah by the enemies, and the decline of the Muslim Ummah never happened until anfus, the change or the decline, started intellectually. It happened it creeped into the Muslim societies, and then it manifested in the economic sphere, in the political sphere, in the global politics, geopolitics. But change, whether from good to evil or evil to good, always happens within anfus. And we have some capable, great Muslim thinkers and philosophers who have who understood this in studying the foreign occupations, in studying the colonialism of the West. For example, we have the great Algerian philosopher and thinker, very famous, Malik ibn Nabi. He proposed this term, which he called qabiliyatul istimar. He gave this term, he called it, because he was writing in Arabic and his works have been translated, Malik ibn Nabi. He called it qabiliyatul istimar. Qabiliya means potential. Qabiliya is potential. And istimar is colonialism, slavery. So he said a nation can never be colonized until it develops the potential of being colonized, until it becomes weak. Exactly like the human body. If the immune system is strong, the diseases and the sickness may not harm the body substantially. But the immune system, if the immune system is very weak, even a small disease can destroy the body. So he says Ummah was colonized because it developed the potential of being colonized, because it became weak inside, because the anfus, the individual reality of the Ummah, our societies, our religious conscience, our educational system, our ta'alluq, connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, religious conscience, our practice of Islam, everything, when it became weak, we developed this potential of being colonized. And those who, and potential of being colonized does not only mean practically. It first and foremost means intellectually. When a nation loses the capability of thinking, we are not thinking anymore, we have potential of being fooled. We develop potential of being deceived. This nation will easily fall into slavery of other people. This nation will easily fall into the trap of the enemies. This is exactly what was the condition of the Ummah in the 4th and 5th centuries after Hijrah, immediately before the Crusades started. So this was the main weakness. Remember this word, al-istimar, means colonialism. And if we take from the Quran, we can add another term here. Istimar is based on, and this is my term, I think I am the first Muslim student of knowledge who has used this term. And inshallah, if it spreads, it becomes a permanent part of the Islamic jargon, that would be good. I call it al-istihmar. From himar. Himar means donkey. Istimar is always based on istihmar, foolishness, fooling people. So people, nation, communities who develop this intellectual decline, intellectual weakness, they don't have capability of engaging with their own legacy. They don't have capability of understanding the geopolitics. They don't have capability of thinking generally. They lose thought. They are not theorizing anymore. They are not creating great thinkers and mujtahidun and scholars who raise them, lift them. They will fall into the trap of others. They will always become colonized. So colonialism is always based on deception, deceiving. For this reason, if you study and this is not our topic, as a side note, if you study the history of colonialism in the Muslim world, it came with this intellectual deception. They always came, so this military colonialism, practical colonialism, occupying the Muslim lands, it came with the intellectual deception also. And for this, they used their intellectuals, their philosophers, particularly the field of Orientalism was used. And this is not a secret anymore. The relationship between Orientalism and colonialism, the relationship between Orientalism and cultural imperialism. These are normal and common themes these days. So those who wrote about the East, those who compiled works and researches about the East, particularly the Muslim world, they gave a good material to those who wanted to colonize these lands. And this term has been, if we use the Quranic jargon, it has been called al-istighfaf. Al-istighfaf in the Quran. Deception. This term has been used with Fir'aun, and we know Fir'aun is the epitome of political hegemony, political despotism before the modern world in the Quran. So in Surah Az-Zukhruf, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about Fir'aun, فَاسْتَخَفَّ قَوْمَهُ فَأَطَاعُوهُ إِنَّهُمْ كَانُوا قَوْمًا فَاسِقِينَ. So he baffled them. So he bluffed them. He bluffed his people. He deceived his people. And they obeyed him. He deceived them. Istakhaffa. It comes from khiffa, which means which in Arabic literally it means something which is light. So he fooled them, deceived them, and they obeyed him. Indeed, they were themselves a people defiantly disobedient of Allah. So they did this because they had the potential of being deceived. That's why Allah says they were fasiqeen. And fisq is crossing the limits in sin and intellectual weakness. So they were intellectually weak. They had this potential of becoming slaves. That's why they became slaves. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not say, فَاسْتَخَفَّ قَوْمَهُ فَأَطَاعُوهُ. He deceived them, Fir'aun deceived them, and they obeyed him, and they were oppressed people. Logically, this should be the sequence, right? Fir'aun deceived them, they were simple people, they were oppressed people. So simplicity, intellectual weakness does not help in, or is not an excuse in nation building. If you are intellectually weak, this is a curse as a nation. So Allah did not say Fir'aun deceived them and they were oppressed people, they were simple people. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said they were fasiq people. They were defiantly disobedient people because they developed this capability. So when we look at Salahuddin al-Ayyubi, as I said, he is tip of the iceberg. When the Ummah reached this level of opening Jerusalem on the hands of Salahuddin al-Ayyubi, the Ummah, the cream of the Ummah, the leaders of the Ummah had worked on this intellectual decline, intellectual weakness. They overcame this intellectual weakness. For this reason, Salahuddin can be called official spokesperson of the revived Ummah. Remember this. That's why I said we have to correct our understanding. We are not waiting Ummah. We should not turn ourselves into a waiting Ummah. We are weak, and our weakness will be removed by a miracle, a person, an individual, an institution, which will suddenly arise and grant us victory. This does not happen. So Salahuddin Ayyubi was the fruit of the revived Ummah. And this is our journey. This is our purpose, understanding how they revived themselves. So the first problem which the Ummah faced in those times was intellectual decline. And if you study the works of history focused on this period, any original source, Al-Bidayah wa Nihaya of Al-Imam Ibn Kathir, rahimahullah, the history book of Al-Imam Ibn Athir, the great book Al-Muntazam of Al-Imam Ibn al-Jawzi. If you focus on this period, you will see that, and the Crusades had also started, but the historians, Muslim historians, they focus on the manifestations of intellectual decline, the manifestations of sectarianism, which happened in that era. And this is a common theme. If you go back to these original sources, this is a common theme in these original sources, the books of Muslim history. So let's talk about this intellectual decline, and actually, inshallah, we will progress gradually to understanding how they worked on this intellectual decline, and it manifested in the practical victory of the Ummah. The first question which we should ask here is about the intellectual unity. Is intellectual unity possible? And what is the meaning of intellectual unity? This is a very important question. Is intellectual unity possible? We know we have schools of thought in Islam. We have schools of thought in theology, in aqidah. We have schools of thought in fiqh. We have different understandings. We have a great legacy. We have the tradition, the rich Muslim tradition, scholars across the spectrum, from east to the west and north to the south, who have their own methodologies, understandings. And we claim that cherishing this legacy, cherishing this history and tradition is the best way of reviving the Ummah. Now, in spite of these seemingly different opinions and methods, and if you study any field of Islamic ilm, Islamic ulum, aqidah, fiqh, you will see we have a lot of discussion, we have a lot of disagreement, we have a lot of ikhtilaf. Now, this ikhtilaf, how can it be removed? And some of these schools of thoughts, they have schools of thought, they have turned into the political ideologies, which have influence on ground in the Muslim Ummah. And Shia-Sunni divide is one of those manifestations. And inshallah, we will gradually talk about that also, as we promised in the introduction. And this Shia-Sunni divide is very influential and important in the Muslim world in our times also. We're following what Iran is doing, the Iran-Israel relationship. For some, it's very obscure. For some others, it is very clear. The Hezbollah, and in fact, the leadership of the Muslim Ummah now, at least in this battle against Israel and the Zionists, is with the Shia. No one can deny this. Whether you agree or disagree with the Shia school of thought, doesn't matter. But practically, it is with them on all fronts. In Lebanon, in Yemen, Iran is directly involved. So, can we remove ikhtilaf? Or in Islam, are we required to remove ikhtilaf? The simple answer to this question is no. We are not required to remove ikhtilaf. Removing ikhtilaf, or working and giving our effort to unite the Ummah by removing and lifting ikhtilaf, so that all Muslims follow the same opinion in everything, and we remove all these schools of thought. Muslims follow only one school of thought, whether in aqidah or fiqh. This is impossible, number one. And it also tarnishes the rich legacy and tradition of the Muslims. And this is also going against the nature of the religious conscience. Because all religions, they develop into, the great religions, they eventually develop into a tradition with schools of thought. And all religions, their followers, religion leads to the religious thinking, and those who reflect on the scriptures of that particular religion, they develop ideas, and we have different minds, we have different scholars, we have different philosophers. This cannot stop. This is natural progression of every religion. You will not see any big religion which has influence in the world without schools of thought. This is impossible, because all religions, they have scholars, they have philosophers, they have thinkers in history, and they reach different conclusions. But yes, what we can say is we must have a red line. So religious conscience is like a highway on which we can have multiple lanes. It's not a problem. We don't need to have only one lane. We have multiple lanes, but we have a border also. Beyond that, you cannot run your car. We can say this in simple language. So no, we don't need to lift this ikhtilaf. We only need to learn and understand how to manage this ikhtilaf, how to turn this ikhtilaf into our strength. This is what the West has successfully done. So don't you think that West, with its power now, with its dominance, doesn't have ikhtilaf? It has disunity at the core, in ideology, in political groups. And this support of the Christian West, if it has remained Christian anymore, to the Jews is based on ikhtilaf. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Quran, their hearts are divided. Their hearts are divided. Even if you think that they are united, their hearts are divided. Because Christianity and Judaism are two different opposite poles, but yet they are united. The political structure of the West, there is a divide in the political structure also. And if you study the philosophers of the West, you will see Mashriq and Maghrib. You will see all these philosophers in their ideologies, in their philosophies. One is to the east, the other is to the west. In spite of that, they were able to cherish and unify all these different legacies and philosophies and ideologies into single worldview. This is the strength of the West. And we don't have ikhtilaf to that level. See, compare, and this is repeated by many scholars, and it is a valid point. Compare the ikhtilaf between Jews and Christians and Shia and Sunni. We don't have that level of ikhtilaf as the Jews and the Christians. The God of the Christians is the fraud of the Jews, na'udhu billah. We consider Isa alayhi salam a great prophet, alayhi salam. But imagine the God of the Christians, Isa alayhi salam, Jesus, is fraud of the Jews. In fact, there is a book by a Jewish scholar, if I'm not mistaken, it is called The Pious Fraud, na'udhu billah, against Isa alayhi salam. And yet they are united. Their eschatology of the end times, their theology, their philosophy is completely different. But they have this strategic alliance. Now we have this problem, always we have this problem in the Ummah. We are not able to cherish ikhtilaf. We are not able to manage ikhtilaf. We are not able to develop our ikhtilaf into something which becomes our strength. This is the problem. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran about the importance of unity. We have many ayat. Allah has commanded us to unite. In fact, if you study the ayat, which you can call divine annotation, on divine annotations of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the battles, particularly the Battle of Uhud. If you read ayat which will reveal about Battle of Uhud, you will see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first and foremost emphasizing on unity. But I will pick one of these ayat which is relevant here. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Anfal, وَأَطِيعُوا اللَّهَ وَرَسُولَهُ وَلَا تَنَازَعُوا, and obey Allah and His Messenger, and don't be divided. وَلَا تَنَازَعُوا, do not dispute. Munaza'ah, ikhtilaf. What are the evil consequences, evil fruits of dispute and disagreement? What are the evil consequences of this tanazu'? Allah said fa, and this fa is for tartib. Yani after fa comes the evil consequences. Allah says وَأَطِيعُوا اللَّهَ وَرَسُولَهُ وَلَا تَنَازَعُوا فَتَفْشَلُوا وَتَذْهَبَ رِيحُكُمْ. Two things will happen. These are the evil consequences of ikhtilaf. Number one, فَتَفْشَلُوا, fashal. You will lose courage. It has been translated as courage, but fashal means loss. You will lose as an ummah. You will become a lost ummah. You will not have any impact in the world. You will be divided. وَتَذْهَبَ رِيحُكُمْ, and then your strength would depart. So there are two evil manifestations of dispute, disagreement. Fashal, fatafshalu, وَتَذْهَبَ رِيحُكُمْ, and your strength would depart. You will become weak. وَاصْبِرُوا, but rather be patient. إِنَّ اللَّهَ مَعَ الصَّابِرِينَ. Indeed, Allah is with the patient. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded us to be united. But remember, intellectual unity is possible, but we have to understand the meaning of unity. Unity does not mean that all Muslims will follow one school of thought. All Muslims, because Islam is the religion of mankind. Islam is not like Judaism, which has come for a particular section of people. It is not a racialist religion. It is a universal religion. And we know humanity is divided into tribes and cultures and ethnicities and different intellects and different cultural baggages, different social realities. How would Islam promote only one interpretation, one school of thought? But however, as I said, we must have a demarcation line. We must have the red lines. Beyond that, we don't accept. And inside that, we can accept and engage and manage our ikhtilaf. Managing and engaging with ikhtilaf does not always mean accepting it. I said this in the Thinking Muslim podcast about ikhtilaf, and those interested can see it, inshallah. We discussed some very intricate and deep points there, if you reflect. I talked about the Shia, and I said there that I listen to the Shia scholars, I read their books, and we must learn to manage our ikhtilaf. We must learn to engage with everyone. So some people were annoyed, some people misunderstood. They thought that I'm promoting Shia and I'm a Shi'i myself, and all these things which happen when you don't have this intellectual background and you don't understand, you're not at the same understanding level with the speaker. I use the term engaging with different groups of the Muslims who are important, who are near to the mainstream, let's say. They are mainstream and near to the mainstream. Sometimes you have to sit with your enemies also. You cannot. You have to sit with your enemies. That's why strategic alliance in geopolitics is a term which has specific meaning. So strategic alliance does not necessarily mean that you agree with your ally. You have to sit with an enemy sometimes. You're forced to, for common interest. So let's keep this for politicians and the experts of geopolitics. What I'm saying here is, I said engaging. So engagement does not mean agreement. Remember this, engagement does not mean agreement. If we don't learn how to engage with each other, we don't know how to lift ourselves above this ikhtilaf, or how to turn this ikhtilaf. We have great legacy scholars, scholarship, ulum. They may have mistakes. No one is a prophet. Only prophets are infallible. These are fallible human beings, scholars, whether Ibn Taymiyyah, Al-Imam al-Razi, Al-Imam al-Ghazali, the Asha'ira, the Sufiya, the Maturidiyya, the Athariya, Hanabila, Salafi. We have such a great treasure and diversity. The problem is, we don't know how to manage this ikhtilaf. We don't know how to lift ourselves beyond this ikhtilaf, and how to turn this ikhtilaf into something positive. And intellectual unity, or being intellectually sane or capable, does not apply on only Islamic ulum. I'm not talking about only Islamic ulum. I'm talking about being intellectually mature generally in all affairs. This ummah now has become intellectually immature. So intellectual unity is important to produce thought. What do we have on table for humanity? What do we have? We don't have technology. We are not controlling the wealth of the world. As I told you before also, the list which came, and I know it was exaggerated, and it is exaggerated, but the list of boycott, the Israeli products which came, I was astonished. Everything is controlled by them. Everything is produced by them. We are not even capable of making a car engine. We are not. I researched a bit. Everything comes from Europe. Everything comes from the West. So what do we have for humanity in material ulum, we don't have anything. They are far ahead in technology, they are far ahead in science. What about the religious sciences which we have, the legacy which we have? We have fallen into reductionism even in that. Have a look at our madaris, have a look at our universities. What are we producing? We don't have, we are studying the same curriculum. We don't want to revise our curriculums. So the problem is we are not producing thought. We don't have vibrant mujtahidun, and this is our problem. We'll come to that. Ijtihad has been, the term ijtihad has been restricted to fiqh, to a particular field of Islamic ilm. So mujtahid will teach us how to pray. Mujtahid will apply his ijtihad in these particular chapters of Islamic law. This is true. But mujtahid is a polymath scholar who guides the ummah in a particular time. We don't have great minds like we had in the past. And as one of the famous Muslim intellectuals of the 20th century, Maulana Maududi rahimullah, he has rightly said, we are still eating from the banquet of our pious predecessors. And I'm into this field every day, every moment. The books which are being published are the best research, the best works in Islamic sciences. Forget about worldly sciences. And we don't have this classification of worldly and Islamic. We have beneficial and harmful knowledge. Harmful is like magic and stuff. It may be knowledge, it may have a methodology. We don't accept it, we don't engage with it. But beneficial knowledge is all types of knowledge, whether revealed or human knowledge. And in human knowledge, we have science, we have technology, we have medicine, we have the social sciences. Our contribution is zero, believe me. In our own legacy, the Islamic sciences, we are not developing it. We are not developing the curriculums. We are not working on our madaris, our universities. It is a big problem. And this was the same situation prevailed in the 4th and 5th centuries. So if you study, as I said, the history books, particularly in this period, you will see the disputes between different theological groups, particularly the scholars who promoted ilmul kalam, and the Hanabila. The Hanabila, who were ultra-traditionalists, they promoted the non-rational method of understanding the Aqidah. So you will see the scholars, Al-Imam Ibn al-Jawzi, Ibn al-Kathir, Ibn al-Athir, and other historians, they have narrated the fights which happened in the madaris, and sometimes the rulers had to intervene. For example, the Nizamiya Madrasa, the famous, or we can call it the first university in the Muslim world, it was the greatest madrasa constructed by the famous Saljuki Grand Wazir, Nizamul Mulk. It became a battlefield of dispute between these, and sometimes it would lead to physical assault. People would die, and they have narrated it. I don't want to go, I have the references, I don't want to go into that. And the rulers had to intervene. Nizamul Mulk himself would intervene in the disputes between Asha'ira and Hanabila. So what happens? What is the problem? The problem is when we don't unite, we don't have intellectual unity, we don't produce thought, we are intellectually divided even in the basic matters of our religion. How do you think? Because my action is based on what I believe. So if I believe that Shia are a deviant group, they are kafir, they are out of Islam, they are my enemies, why will I support them? Why will I support their action against Israel? I will always be skeptical about it, right? I'm not declaring them deviant or correct. This is a different discussion. I don't want to go into that. Or the Shia, they think, they have this perception that Ahlul Sunnah, they are our enemies. They are the people who oppressed us in history. And our first priority should be to keep them at bay, to destroy them. Why will they support us? Why will they support any Ahlul Sunnah entity in the Middle East? We will always be divided because our intellectual aqidah, my belief system, my ideology will define my actions. So the problem was the enemies of Islam in those centuries, in that period of time, they were plotting against the Muslims, and Muslims were busy in these trivial matters, something which was our strength. All these schools of thought, they were our strength, and we could learn from them, reject, uh, take the best of it, create a thought system, give humankind thought, create scholars, those who theorize for Ummah at least. We turned it into something which destroyed us. So this was the condition in those times. So for example, we have this great scholar, Hanbali scholar, Al-Imam Ibn Aqil. He's one of the greatest minds in those times, and he had to face a lot of hardship from his own group. He belonged to Hanabila, and from others also, because he was against this divide. He was the supporter of unity, and sometimes he would even sit with Mu'tazila, not to accept everything from them, but in order to learn from them and see what is going on. What do they say? So Ibn Aqil was rejected by his own people. He had to face hardship and sometimes prison also. He says in one of the narrations how these different groups, they compromise with the political reality. So he says the rulers, different rulers would come and they would support different groups. Like we have some Abbasid Khulafa, they supported the Mu'tazila, and Al-Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal had to face the hardship, and there are rulers who supported different groups. So the ruler who comes to support a group, and this group becomes is supported by the political entities, and what happens is that Ummah aligns these groups, and different scholars, they align themselves with the political reality. So for example, he says قال ابن أقيل وقد رأيت أكثر أعمال الناس لا يقع إلا للناس إلا من أصم الله من ذلك. I have seen that most of the actions of people, they do it for people, they don't do it for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then he mentions the list of people and scholars who align themselves with different rulers. Okay, so he says, for example, here some rulers came who supported Asha'ira, Ilmul Kalam, and everyone started supporting Asha'ira in those times. And then after them, a ruler came who supported Hanabila, and everyone became a Hanbali in that age. So for example, he says ثم جاءت الدولة فأظم الأشعرية. A ruler came, a political entity was established, they supported Asha'ira. فرأيت من كان يتسخط علي بنفء التشبيه غلوا في مذهب أحمد كان يظهر بغضب يعود بالغمض على الحنابلة. I saw those who were against me because I would support Asha'ira. They started rejecting the Hanabila themselves. Yani they changed their positions because of the political entities. ورأيت كثيرا من أصحاب المذاهب انتقلوا ونافقوا. I saw, and he's talking about Al-Imam Ibn Aqil rahimahullah. He lived in 4th and 5th century, 5th century after Hijrah. He says, I saw many followers of these madhahib, the scholars, the followers of these madhahib, the schools of thought, intaqalu, they would change positions swiftly with the change in the political system, وَنَافَقُوا, and they became hypocrites, so on and so forth. And he has narrated this story, and there are scholars, the historians who have narrated more astonishing things. For example, Al-Imam Ibn Kathir in Al-Bidayah, and these are some examples. We cannot take all these narrations. These are some examples to understand the climate of those times. For example, Ibn Kathir in Al-Bidaya wa Nihaya, he says, he mentions a qadi, he mentions a judge of Baytul Maqdis. Imagine, the judge of Baytul Maqdis, Jerusalem, and he also became judge of Dimashq, and the best cities of the Muslim world in those times. Muhammad ibn Musa ibn Abdullah al-Balasa'uni. He died in 506 after Hijrah. Same, 4th, 5th, and 6th centuries. We're talking about these 200, 300 years. ويعرف بالدمشقي. He was known as Dimashqi because he lived in Dimashq. ولي قضاء بيت المقدس ثم قضاء دمشق. He became judge of Baytul Maqdis and judge of Dimashq. وكان غاليا في مذهب أبي حنيفة. He was a staunch supporter of the madhab school of Abu Hanifa. He was a staunch Hanafi. Fine, no problem. But see his position. This was the problem. وكان يقول, he would say, لو كانت لي الولاية لأخذت من أصحاب الشافعي الجزية. عجيب. He said, if I was the governor, he was qadi only. If I was the governor, I would take jizya tax from the Shafi'is. Jizya is taken from the non-Muslim citizens of the Muslim state. He said, I would take jizya from Shafi'is. Imagine, this was the problem. And as I said, this is not only physical divide. When you are intellectually divided, you are not able to produce any thought. You're not able to produce anything substantial for mankind, even for your own ummah. So we have some manifestations of this intellectual divide. We have the famous mas'ala of the gates of ijtihad, closing the gates of ijtihad. Books have been compiled on this mas'ala, closing the gates of ijtihad. Stagnation in knowledge. Stagnation of knowledge. We don't need any more mujtahideen. And there are different theories about that. I don't want to go into that because some scholars who promoted this idea, they had their own justifications and reasons also. But generally speaking, this was not a good idea. And as I said, ijtihad is the most important institution in Islam, which keeps Islam vibrant. Ijtihad is not only about fiqh, about wudu and salah and prayer and zakah. Ijtihad is the institution, legal institution in particular, to create solutions for the Muslim ummah. Okay, so we have lost it. We don't have great mujtahideen in our times. We have great scholars, but we lack great mujtahideen who would create alternatives for the ummah in this dominant reality of the West. They would create our own political theories, our own economic theories, social theories. They would engage with social sciences. And some scholars, they tried to work on that, but all in vain. We are still in the process to reach there. We have not created some substantial ijtihadat in our times, if we use the word and the term ijtihad in its broader meaning. So closing the gates of ijtihad was also a big problem, which resembles our times also. And then we have the manifestations, the evil manifestations of this intellectual decline. Evil manifestations in education. The educational system of those times, the curriculum, it was in decline, it was biased, stagnation. The ummah was divided into different madhahib. See, subhanallah, in our times, we have this divide even about the most apparent, important qadiyah and mas'ala of our time, which is the Palestine problem. So I'm astonished when I see on social networking the Muslims are, some Muslims at least, are even divided about this masala. We have the Madkhalis, we have the ultra Salafis on one side, and we have the supporters of Shia on the other side. So I'm not saying who is correct and who is wrong, forget about that. But we have this divide, ajib. This is a very strange situation, because I don't think in modern history we have a more clear battle. Of course, as I said, no narrative is permanent in geopolitics. It's very difficult to understand what is happening in Syria, in Iraq. What happened, it was always difficult. But of course, we are very clear about the fact that the West has destroyed the Muslim world. The Muslim blood has been spilled, and in our times, the ideas, the concepts, the institutions which we used to cherish, and they were promoted as something grand and great for humanity, like the human rights, International Court of Justice, this and that, it has been trampled under the feet of the United States and Israel. It doesn't mean anything to anymore. Now, you can see the condition of the United Nations and what happened, I think yesterday, before that, the attack on the hospitals, and now this has become a common thing. So the point here is, in spite of that, this is, in my opinion, the most clear battle against the Jews, against this Zionist entity all dunya has seen. I used to think about the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, in which he said about the final battle with the Jews, which will happen near the end times, that even the rocks will speak, the stones will speak. If a Jew will hide behind a stone or a rock, the stone will speak. The Prophet ﷺ said, it will say, هذا يهودي خلفي. This is a Jew hiding behind me, kill him. فاقتله. O believer, Ya Abdullah, kill him. Except the tree of Gharqad, because it is their tree, as the Prophet ﷺ said. I used to reflect on this hadith. We have this concept of mercy and the sanctity of human life. How will this happen? Now, I think we have reached a point, and this is about not even rocks and stones giving refuge to a Jew because of their crooked nature, because of their destruction which they have caused, because of their anti-humanity ideology. We can see that. So in spite of that, we have some Muslims who are divided. They don't want to unite for Palestine. I'm not saying that we engage in geopolitics. If I'm not from politics, I don't know geopolitics, but at least I can speak about it. I'm a scholar. I can write about it. Allah has given me wealth. I can spend my wealth to this cause or any other cause of the Muslims. I can do it. So we don't need to make excuses because I don't understand politics. I don't know what is going on. I don't know which party to support, so I'm not doing anything. So this was the same situation in the times before Crusades, particularly the divide between the mutakallimin, Asha'ira, Hanabila, the divide in the fiqhi madhahib, the Hanafis, Shafis, Malikis, and Hanbalis, and the divide between the Sufis, and inshallah we'll talk about that, the pacifism which was promoted by Tasawwuf, and how the great scholars of Tasawwuf, they corrected it. And as I have said this many times, that the great mujahideen, particularly in the modern age, those who fought against European and Western colonialism, they were all Sufis. But this is correct Tasawwuf. And then we have a distorted form of Tasawwuf. A distorted form of Tasawwuf spread and was promoted, which led to political pacifism. We should blame only ourselves. This is taqdeer of Allah. This is will of Allah, divine decree of Allah. We just sit back. We don't do anything. Wait for the nusra of Allah. It created this pacifism in the minds of Muslims and divided the Muslim opinion. Inshallah, we'll come to that. So we have this evil manifestations in education, this divide in the madrasas. I gave the example of Nizamiya. The divide between the ulama, curriculum was not revised, because see, Muslim Ummah is the last hope for all mankind, and in the Muslim Ummah, the scholars. And if the scholars are not at the highest intellectual levels, which will depend on the curriculum, which will depend on the methodology of education. Education has always remained important. Study some important books of the modern Muslim philosophers like Dr. Naqib al-Attas, Dr. Ismail Raji al-Faruqi, in their revivalist projects, they focused on the importance of education. How should we work on education and decolonizing the minds of Muslims, desecularizing the minds of Muslims? So this secular education will not create mujahideen, will not create people who will stand for this ummah. In evil manifestations, we have the social fabric of the Muslim society was harmed. The political system was in shambles. As I said, in this period, we had the same situation. We had the weak Sunni empire, the Seljuks, who were struggling, or they were at the rise, and the Shia states, the Fatimids, and after them we have the Buwayhids. They were controlling the Muslim, they were influential in the Muslim world. And the only different thing about our times and their times was, at least we had some great scholars who tried to engage or become ambassadors between the Sunni and the Shia state. This was something beautiful which happened in those times between the Seljuks, for example, and the Buwayhids. For example, we have the greatest political thinker ever, Al-Imam al-Mawardi, rahimahullah. Al-Imam al-Mawardi is one of the best political thinkers, the fuqaha. He was an ambassador between the Sunni and the Shia state. The same scholar who has said this famous quote, I always mention this, and I want my students to remember this. He says in his great book, Adabuddini wa Dunya, Laysa dinun zala sultanuhu. There is no religion which loses its authority. Illa buddilat ahkamuhu. Except its rulings are changed and distorted. وَطُمِسَتْ أَعْلَامُهُ. And its great concepts are destroyed. So a religion which loses its authority on ground, it will be eventually distorted. Okay, and this happened with Islam also, but Allah has promised to protect this last and final revelation. So the conclusion of this disunity, confusion, chaos was that the Ummah in those times did not have any clear concepts and goals based on the challenges of their times. They were busy with something else, and the reality was on a different path. The reality was the Crusades were beginning, or the Crusades had already started, and they were focusing on something else. Like in our times, there are many Muslim scholars, organizations, and in the East, in the West, who are wasting the human resource of the Ummah, and they're wasting the efforts of the Ummah. So the conclusion of these evil manifestations in education, in the social fabric of the Ummah, the political sphere, the only because it was still the Abbasid Khilafah, at least in name. The Khalifa was on the coin only, minting the coins, his name only in the khutbah of the Jum'ah. The Ummah was divided into small states, and they were struggling for their own. So this is a form of nation state, if we don't take it in that meaning, when we are divided into small entities, and the only purpose of these political entities was survival, to survive. So when we are struggling for survival, don't think that we will create something big or we will create a change. Same applies in our times. The political entities, at least which are independent to some extent, they are not vessels of the West, like the Arab countries, they're struggling for their survival. So when we are struggling for the survival, don't expect something big. So the conclusion was no goals and no clear concepts based on the challenges. And after that, we have another important reality in these centuries, which was pacifism created by Tasawwuf. I will conclude today. We'll talk about this inshallah, but I will conclude today by a very important text from one of the greatest original sources of Tasawwuf, Awariful Ma'arif by Al-Imam al-Suhrawardi, rahimahullah. The scholars of Tasawwuf, when they saw this distorted form of Tasawwuf, making Muslims, promoting alien ideologies between Muslims and making them passive spectators of the reality, not acting, not engaging actively in changing the reality, they took this responsibility on their shoulders and they compiled the original sources, which became original sources of Tasawwuf, in order to revive Tasawwuf, in order to clear this great ilm of distortions. So one of these sources, we have the great Al-Imam al-Qushayri, his Al-Risala al-Qushayriya, and in the forward, all these scholars have mentioned that our purpose was to clear Tasawwuf from the distortions, connect Tasawwuf with Quran and Sunnah. So we have this great book, Awariful Ma'arif by Al-Imam al-Suhrawardi. In this book, this is one of the original sources of Tasawwuf. We have this chapter, Al-Bab al-Tasi', chapter 9. He says, في ذكر من انتمى إلى الصوفية وليس منهم. This chapter is about those who attributed themselves to Tasawwuf and yet they are not from them. They attributed themselves to Tasawwuf wrongly. So they are from those who distorted this ilm. And in this chapter he says, فَقَوْمٌ مِّنَ الْمَفْتُونِينَ سَمَّوْا أَنفُسَهُمْ مَلَامَتِيَّةً وَلَبِسُوا لِبْسَةَ الصُّوفِيَّةِ. There were people from those who were tested by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they were on the wrong path. They called themselves, they gave themselves the titles of Sufiya, they wore the clothes of Sufiya, they attributed themselves لِيُنْسَبُوا بِهَا إِلَى الصُّوفِيَّةِ. This was so that they are attributed to Sufiya. وَمَا هُمْ مِنَ الصُّوفِيَّةِ بِشَيْءٍ. But they were not from the real Sufiya, because real Tasawwuf is connected with Quran and Sunnah. It is the spiritual change which happens in the nafs, the methodology of changing our nufus and creating a change outside. That's why I said all great mujahideen were from Sufiya, and scholars have compiled books about that. So he says, بل هم في غرور وغلط ويتسترون بلبسة الصوفية توقيا تارة ودعوا أخرى. And they hide behind the clothes of Sufiya in order to promote themselves. وينتهجون, and they tread this path. They tread the path of أهل الإباحة, of those who declared everything halal for them. They don't follow any sharia. So he says, وَهَذَا هُوَ عَيْنُ الْإِلْحَادِ وَالزَّنْدَقَ وَالْإِبْعَادِ. This is zandaqa. This is falsehood. فَكُلُّ حَقِيقَةٍ رَدَّتْهَا الشَّرِيعَةِ فَهِيَ زَنْدَقَ. Because any method, any action, any reality which rejects sharia, which is not connected with sharia, with Quran and Sunnah, it is zandaqa. And this is directly from the book of Al-Imam al-Suhrawardi, Awariful Ma'arif. This was another problem. And we have this problem in our times also. You will see we have on one side the ultra Salafis who claim to fight for the sake of Islam and they want jihad in the world. And on the other side, we have the ultra Sufis who have nothing to do with, and the main narrative they have is against jihad. No jihad, just focus on your nafs, make dhikr. These are important things. And they are the opposite poles. And they claim that jihad is extremism, and most of these groups, they allied themselves with the Western governments. And it is really interesting to see that the enemies always promote these alien groups and unorthodox movements. For example, in our times, Qadianis and modernists and other unorthodox movements in order to weaken the Muslim Ummah. And this happened in those times. So these groups were promoted like Batiniya. Batiniya, the Batini fitnah, which was created by this group, was created by a person named Al-Hasan ibn Sabbah, the famous uh, يعني, uh, Batini, who claimed to follow the Ismaili sect. He created this group in 463, was active in 463 after Hijrah. And this is, sorry, this is the same period. And they were supported by some political entities in order to weaken the Ummah. Batini movement became very famous. They had their literature, their ideology, and they created an armed wing also. And the Muslim Sunni governments had to fight them, and eventually they went into the dustbin of history. But the point is that these unorthodox movements, whether in Tasawwuf or now we have the Madkhalis, the extremist brand of Salafism, who have harmed the Ummah. We have the extremist strands of Salafism like the ISIS and stuff. They also harmed. يعني, they played into the hands of the enemies of Islam. We have extremism in the Sufis. We have many Sufi movements. They also played into the hands of enemies. They allied with them. They cooperated with them, and they are cooperating even in our times. All these unorthodox movements are utilized and used by the enemies of Islam to weaken the Ummah. Okay, so if we conclude, what do we conclude from? There are some other points. We'll take it inshallah in the next session. The conclusion is, number one, stagnation of the Islamic institutions. And by institution, we don't only mean physical entities. The schools of thought, the thought process, scholars, theories, ijtihad, stagnation of the Islamic institutions in guiding the Ummah about the main challenges of their times. Number two, promotion of alien worldviews and ideologies. And supporting, so these alien, you see the educated class of the Ummah, it does not understand the language of the scholars. There is a gap between the scholars and the educated class, because they are educated in a secular curriculum, the Western curriculum. It is a different story. And the scholars are, they did not work on this. As I said, there are some philosophers like Dr. Ismail Raji al-Faruqi. He came up with this idea of Islamization of knowledge. And by Islamization of knowledge, he meant Islamizing social sciences, because this is the area which frames our society. Social sciences, psychology, philosophy, anthropology, economics, politics. Eventually, the theories which are promoted in these sciences, they become the reality of our times. So, but this project did not find any other great minds after Ismail Raji al-Faruqi. He was assassinated in the United States. And after him, I don't think anyone of his caliber, he pushed this agenda and this idea of Islamization. So promotion of alien worldviews and ideologies was also prevalent in those times, particularly the unorthodox movements in the Ummah, like the Batiniya in those times, and our scholars compiled works against Batiniya, okay, and in our times, in order to weaken the Ummah so that we don't reach intellectual ijma, intellectual consensus, intellectual unity, and we waste our energies, our human resource in things which don't help us in any way. Let's stop here, inshallah. We will talk more about this in the next session. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us understanding of these affairs. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to lift our intellectual weakness. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us create a change within ourselves so that we can change the reality around us. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us the same ummah about which He has said in the Quran, you are the best ummah, or you are ummatan wasata, you are the balanced ummah, the best ummah. Wasat also means in Arabic, original Fasih Arabic, it also means the best, so that we can fulfill our role of guiding the humanity. We can bring much to the table in order to benefit the mankind at large and our own ummah, inshallah. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive our shortcomings and mistakes in these sessions. Let us ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by His beautiful names and exalted attributes to help the Palestinian brothers in their jihad. And I'm a Kashmiri, of course. I always make dua for Kashmir. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help our mujahideen, those who are struggling in these times of ghurba, when everyone is busy with life and no one cares. There are some noble souls, angels, who stand for the cause of Islam, who stand for the cause of Ummah, who don't forget the real purpose of life. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant them victory. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep them steadfast. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also give us tawfiq of following the same path according to our capabilities. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by His beautiful names and exalted attributes to cure our sick, accept our martyrs, and forgive all our dead. Ameen ya Rabbal Alameen. Wa sallallahu ta'ala ala nabi al-ummi. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.